nice. That all looks very nice. Very nice. Alright, here we go. Streaming. Watch now. How do we link? Actually, no. That Twitch recap really wants me to go. Here we go. I can report. I can edit. Hmm. Let's see here. Well, so the first part of this stream is going to be me figuring out how to get stream link Twitch. Ah, step-by-step guide. Wonderful. Is there... Oh, is it just the... Just a second. That can't... No, that can't be right. It's probably right. God damn it, I'm so mad. God damn it, I'm so mad. There we go. Well, let's just give this to all my people. This is going to be really awkward once I export this and put it on YouTube. It's fine. I've actually not watched any other streams, so I actually know how they look normally. Alright. So, yeah. Okay, I got it shared everywhere. So, this is a writing stream. We're gonna write. Let's see how this looks. Actually, I need to probably have Twitch up. Doot, doot, doot. I'm gonna mute. I'm gonna mute my channel for myself so I can see. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Alright, so, and I actually managed to get my chat right here, so I can do sub chat. Look at that shit. Beautiful. Okay, so, doing a writing stream. I'm going to try to do these a little more commonly. It took me forever to get set up today, because I wasn't ready for it. However, hope you guys like the sound of typing, because I'm going to be doing it a lot. So I've been thinking about the robots half of this book. Good old Steel. I've just been kind of pecking at the writing project for a while. I did a little bit of graphic design, as you can see here, for the acid half, which I'm really happy with. I think it adds a really good texture. We'll have to see it when it actually prints out from Lightning Source, but I suspect it'll look really good. Unfortunately, as you can see here, doesn't work so well with the way I've got these set up, because they're just these big blocks of blank white behind them, and I don't know how to make those transparent. I'm sure there's an easy way to do it, like a 3-step process, but right now what I got kind of mired in doing, and I find that I get mired a lot, was I had this in the photo editor, and I was trying to get the white space off, and it just left these weird lumps. So you can go in there and you can get closer and actually do like pixel by pixel changes, and you can, like, if you zoom in enough, you can see that it's really pixelated like MS Paint. But that is a lot of effort. So I'm like, okay, well, clearly I need to find a better process for doing that before I get into this. And I'm going to have to edit and update every single one of those images, which is going to be a lot of work. However, it might make parts like this, where this formatting is a little close and awkward, a little easier, because I'll be able to kind of move them around, and instead of this, let me actually show you what this looks like. So if you move this, the whole block moves over, so it looks really awkward. And if you make that displace text, it looks really bad. But so like all of this would be just displacing it in a big chunk. Oh gosh, I don't really want to mess with this too bad. But like, yeah, even if you do like this, you can see that it just, yeah, it messes it up really badly. However, if you've edited it so that it actually conforms to the rough shape by doing the cutouts like I've been doing, then just this part of the text would move over, which wouldn't be too bad. So primary writing's been done on this for about a month and a half, 2 months, somewhere in there, and I haven't yet. Yeah, I've got empty pages and stuff that I got to format, but the actual writing itself is really good. Um, Now, inevitably, I need to test all of this stuff, and testing it might make it kind of, well, I've also been adding art. You can tell here that these boxes are not ideal, so I should probably edit these down. This is going to be a nightmare to try to make all of this flow correctly. So again, I want to get a better process for that. But yeah, that's what I've been just kind of like pecking at for the last little bit. I tried to do, let's actually scoot down to steel, because acid is done. You can see this wonderful bestiary, which is done. I'm really happy with the bestiary, and I'm really, really happy with the lures. The lures are chunky. I did note that I missed a spot. I'm going to go down here, like right here. I didn't design this. I just didn't write it down. So, oops. Um, but yeah, we'll get that finished up. But that's literally the only part I still need to write in that. So steel, I made a real good go at. I realized as I was writing this that I really had to make this from the ground up, because the assumptions that exist within their robot world of Babel Kiminar are not the assumptions that exist in the world of Ashes and Ghosts at all. Um, like they really can't like grow their own food or anything, and so I realized that I needed. And another thing is the artificial heroes, these guys that you play in this, they're very tied to the setting. And as I was designing it, I realized that does that say I'll pass? That's amazing. Anyway, I never know what the artists are going to sneak into these, so that's really cool. But what I was realizing as I was writing them was that these things are a Mastroianni doll uh, of a bunch of nested uh, issues that can greatly complicate the writing. So in previous videos, you've heard me complain about the exalted take on these guys, um, the alchemical exalted, and the problem is that they are, and I don't like to use this term incorrectly. I'm going to use it incorrectly, even though I know this is incorrect. They're exception based. So an exception based design basically says instead of having a single unified set of mechanics that you use to resolve things, you have these distinct, unique mechanics, and that's actually fine. Exalted is made to work like that. Part of its base assumptions are that there will be distinct divergences from the rules in the form of charms, right? But these guys are even more fundamentally different than that, because they're robots, so you have to like, gosh, there's a lot to go into. But they're robots, so they aren't people. They don't have organs. They don't need to eat the same way or sleep, etc. So you have to make rules for all of that. So that's a big exception that diverges from the norm of just being a person, because you're not one anymore. You're something very alien. And their charms don't work the same way either. Uh, which, because it's a kung fu game, you learn the kung fu move and then you have it forever. And these guys are different. They're modular. Their kung fu, such as it is robot parts that they install on themselves and have to uninstall. And so there's all this word count, this bloviation for all these exceptions to the core design, and it's in service of an interesting concept, but in play it is extremely clunky. And the other thing is, the way they conceptualize the robot moves is really awkward, right? Because you have stuff like a targeting computer, and they've got to make that like a physical thing that goes onto your body, and then they've got to make rules for that that aren't just you get some more dice to target things, because they've already trod that ground with the Solar Exalted, who, again, because of the awkward way they had to design it, all the fundamental stuff is also attached to the most powerful exalts. And so there's this kind of natural cap on competence for the other splats, which means they have to be more complicated for less power. And so your cognitive load is all jumbled up in Exalted, where if you play the most powerful Exalted, it's the no-brainer, easiest, intuitive design. And if you play the weaker Exalted, it's far more complicated and you get less effect overall. So the satisfaction is inverted in this very awkward way. And people get a lot of Exalted people get super upset whenever any of the splats can do things better than the Solars. So that's how they want it, but they have the designers of Exalted wrote themselves into a corner of absolute misery as a result. So I came to a few realizations as I was actually working on these guys, and one of them was that I had to split Kung Fu from their robot augmentations. So that was the first thing I did. But then I also realized that although I really like the idea that was present in Exalted, where there's this clarity mechanic that as you become a bigger and weirder robot, you sort of diverge from humanity and become more machine-like. Although I like that mechanically, representing that has become, well, it's a little bit strange, right? Because you have to keep a I mean, it's a little easier in my version because there could be two poles to it, which they don't have. They just have clarity going up consistently, and then you kind of balance it against the stats that represent your soul and your humanity. Like I think it's your virtues or your willpower or something, or your essence it might be. But in my game, I can actually make it where there's a function of those modular augmentations that increase your clarity stat, and I can just do that as a single imbalance that makes dramatic demands of you, or it takes a mechanical toll. And that's a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to track that. And I ballast that with the more kung fu you have, the more powerful your soul is, and the more human it is. So again, that's a fun like 1-2 thing. But there's a lot of stuff with these guys and with their societies that is gonna make like the lores and even like moving through their world a lot different. The enemies they have, it's all constructed. Um, like they're constructed literally, and there needs to be a societal reason why you would pour massive amounts of resources into a kung fu robot in your world. And there are reasons they kind of and I was realizing this because thankfully when I designed the game, I designed it in a very robust way where you can have direct power comparisons. So you can actually compare, like, say, a lone wolf fist to like a tank, and it's pretty favorable for the tank in the very very early parts of being a lone wolf fist, and then rapidly your power scale leaps up, and the tanks don't stand a chance against you. And when you think about it like that, when you think about these guys as living military assets that have like a cultural and like religious even reason for existing, um, you can think of them like, what if we made a prince, or what if we made a king, or what if we made a warlord who was also like a living battleship, basically, that could just lay waste to armies, and then suddenly the governing forces of Babel Kaminar, the cultures, have a reason to create these things, and they have a reason to create one another, and their own unique struggles with humanity versus their robotic nature will be really. It winds up being a thing that drives the drama really nicely. I also, of course, need stuff for them to do. Right here, you can see them putting down some kind of like uprising, like I'm going to gang uprising, and I think this needs to be a function that's explored explicitly enough within the lores that there's like resource based reasons to do this, and I do this in Lone Wolf Fist too. Like the way the resource system works in there, resources are very scarce, and there's a reason that you would use violence to get resources and to defend them. So Lone Wolf Fist, their virtues are kind of uh, oriented around protecting the people that make resources so the world can become a better place. um, and yeah, so that kind of gives them a sort of alignment with these guys because they sort of do the same thing. Violence is always a shortcut to getting the stuff that you want, and they gotta deal with that reality. So I like that. There's like a lore reason for that. But again, it made me think about, well, how do resources work in this world? And I realized that I was gonna have to be smarter than the alchemical authors were. The alchemical authors really literally put you in a closed system. And they also had a bunch of metaphysical stuff that just doesn't. I don't care for it. I like in Exalted, everyone has an actual immortal soul, which is not really a dimension of religion I get into in my game. The afterlife isn't something I really explore a lot. I do in this supplement a little bit because you can go to hell, but I don't like have like they have souls that are commodities more or less, and you have two of them kind of. You have like your animal soul and then your higher reasoning, and the metaphysics of Exalted are extremely awkward and unintuitive and unclear as a result of that. And so every time they go to write about them, it really feels like four or five different people didn't agree about what was going to happen. So, like in Autochthonia, when you're born, you don't have a soul, and they give you a soul gem, and the soul gem has a soul implanted in it from this big soul matrix that's in Autochthon, right? And the reason he has that is because he eats souls, right? He'll just nom noms your souls, and every once in a while he'll take a bunch of them and he'll eat them, and that's his fuel. That is the only fuel source for Autochthon. So their air, their water, their everything. That's the core fuel source. He doesn't burn any fuels otherwise that I can see. He produces nutrient slurry based on rendering down dead human bodies. So it's like it's a very closed system, and as a result of that, it really sort of doesn't make sense. Um, and in my world, I thought it would be more interesting if they initially started with a closed system like that, and it almost immediately failed, and so it had to like reach out side of itself to like grab resources from the surrounding environment. And so that way that kind of gives you like an in as a GM if you want to put this in your game. You have this like this huge like metal moon thing that's like floating around, and occasionally its tendrils will come down and just destroy huge swathes of the world of ashes and ghosts and suck up the resources because it's trying to keep up with these guys, and the constant human need for more. Um, and I like that. I like it because it 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 quantifies the resources enough that I can kind of get a grip on them. Um, because otherwise, you've got this weird closed system thing, and I feel like entropy would eat that alive very rapidly. Maybe that's the point of Autochtonia, but I like that the entropy is something that they kind of have to deal with within the world. Um, and so what I've been realizing is that this whole system of their world is much more intimately interconnected than I'd realized initially. So I went back to first principles. You can see I've got my old fluff here, and then I rewrote a bunch of it. So I tweaked and changed a few things, um, just to kind of give me a little more to work with. Like I I broadened out. There was a distinction between like the magical sentient island that Babel Kaminar used to be, um, yeah, which was called Amar Utu, and then the godhead of Babel Kaminar I named Marduk, which gives it kind of the proper sort of mythological resonance. And I very explicitly did like a Marxian thing as the initial society, and then made it immediately catastrophically collapse. I sort of just fleshed everything out and gave it more detail, and my thinking about things expanded considerably. Um, I went into some more detail about the gods, such as they are, that exist within the clockwork world, the creation and the reasons for the artificial heroes that I've called the Ophanim, which is the angel word for wheels, which are those really weird angels that are like wheels within wheels with eyes. I thought that was cool. Calling them the wheels felt about right. And like it's sort of got a gears and cogs vibe. And I also described how their kung fu worked with a little more depth. So now I actually have a much more and this is by far the single most robust fluff session I've ever written. Uh, and each one of these little stanzas you'll notice kind of self-contained, which is nice. Uh, they introduce and describe the elements that players and GMs are need to be familiar with if they want to run in this setting, which I think is really important to front load people with in a as readable and referenceable a method as I can. Remember that RPGs are cookbooks, so you want to be able to flip right to this. So I have these nice friendly headers, you know. Um, and I have a bad tendency to name these in ways that are a little awkward or they don't really follow what I write afterwards. So I fixed these names so that they are here is the subject of this stanza, right? And some of them, it's whenever you're writing like long form writing, which I don't really do anymore, so I should cut this habit out. But what you do is you tee up the next section with the end of the last section. So some of them do that, but for the most part, these can be read individually without really making things too muddled. So that was really important to me. So if they want to know about the kung fu, boom, it's right there. I've not gotten back to this section yet. I really should. That should be centered a little bit more. Let's save that. Because I've done a few different versions of this, and I'm contemplating. Uh, One of the things I'm running into, let's go back down to the augmentations here, is I want to finish up the augmentations and then do the kung fu. Because once the augmentations and kung fu are done, uh, we've got 99% then. Like, once I got those done with the acid half of the book, it was really just a matter of time before the rest fell into line. The problem I ran into, though, and the reason I'm kind of being a little recursive and going back and redoing stuff, is whenever you go down to the augmentations, they have a lot of gaps, right? I set myself a very high bar. I always do this. I always kind of like I like to structure my writing by saying, okay, I'm going to have X, Y, and Z amounts of these different tiers of things, right? And I'm not 100%. I like the way the acid techniques work, but the steel ones don't do everything I want them to do yet. Excuse me. Now, I'm actually really proud of the core robotics. You can see that these are pretty much done. I think, yeah, I've got things like navigation devices, radios, um, missile pods, drones, stuff that you would expect to see in pretty much every kind of robot. And so I'm really happy with like the very basic um, way these things work. But there's a few points where I'm not entirely certain about it. Like, for example, to make the Transformers, let's see here, size 1. Oh, that's actually only size 1. That's cool. But to make the Transformers references a little more clear, I put a transformation sprocket in here, which I think is actually what Transformers 1 called the little thing in your chest that allows you to transform. Or they might have called it a cog, a transformation cog. But yeah, I've got one of these, which is you can transform between different forms, and you have like a primary and a vehicle form. Um, the issue though with that is whenever you have a non-humanoid form, a lot of the assumptions of the system start getting kind of awkward because the system's already a little bit abstracted, right? Every system's abstracted a little bit, but mine's a little more than normal because a typical system abstraction is like you'll roll a 20-sided die and that'll represent a successful attack, right? Or that'll represent your attempt at a successful attack, and it can be several swipes culminating in a single useful stab or whatever. But that's what it represents. And that abstraction's pretty minimal when you get right down to it, right? But my system is a little different because instead of rolling a single d20, you roll a pool of d10s and then you match them, and they can be those can manifest in a lot of ways. They can be a representation of your strength or dexterity or your skills. They can be a representation of you attacking or defending. They can be a representation of your reaction time and your mastery of the battlefield that allows you to like get the upper hand on your foes. They can be a lot of stuff, right? So the problem with that is that that versatility is based on the assumption that you're like more or less a person and can do what a person can do, and I really lean into that aspect of tabletop role playing games. It's a universal aspect of tabletop role playing games, by the way. It's one of their definitory elements, in my estimation, as a designer. But the problem with that is that if you are now a car, you have a different set of assumptions on what you can do. And whenever you diverge from the assumption of like what a person can do, you have to stipulate. And if you don't stipulate, you don't really properly quantify these powers against each other. So like now I've got pretty robust rules, right, for vehicles. So I'm not terribly worried about people kind of intuitively understanding what these things' limitations and capabilities are in general. But you have things like the question of, okay, the kung fu power that I have is centered around a kick, and I only have wheels now. Can I kick with a wheel? And that's a good question, right? And it's one that's kind of tricky to answer concretely, because if you err on the side of awesome, which I think is a reasonable thing to do, and you're like, yeah, of course you can kick with a wheel. Like you just have to describe it in a cool way. That's kind of what Exalted does with their stunt system, you know. But the problem with that is the value of a leg and the value of a wheel are distinct, right? Because you could just have wheels as a robot, right? I've got the wheeled mobility system here. So that implies that you could have wheels instead of legs. So you can see where right away this just becomes kind of a headache. And I think for the most part, what I did was I abstracted systems into manipulators, which are things like arms, and mobilizers, which are things that are like legs. And that worked pretty well, right? Um, so this also does open the door for potentially weird and not very aesthetically symmetrical builds. And what I mean by that is like you could be like a car that has like a single leg on the front that you kick with. That's not very aesthetically coherent, right? But it makes sense within the mechanics of the game. And that's the problem that arises whenever you get a little too specific about the limitations of mechanics is people find creative ways around them, and a lot of times that doesn't really jive with what you want to manifest in the game. The ideal situation is what players want to use as a way to solve the problems that they're having are things that would kind of evoke the aesthetic that you're going for within the game. So, like, if you want to fight with guns, you have to, in my game, get the gun fu power. What is it called? Path of the Bullet. I love the name of that kung fu. Um, but you have to get Path of the Bullet, and Path of the Bullet uh, makes you very like the powers the way they manifest make you work like Vash the Stampede from Trigun, right? Complete with having like the crazy arm that turns into things. Uh, so this is good. The solution to having ranged combat is that you will aesthetically look more like one of the coolest ranged combat characters of all time. Great, that works for me. But whenever you have like the problem of I can't kick because I'm a car, you would like I'm not saying you'd never because we're talking about Transformers here, but I'm not saying you would never see the scenario in which there was a guy with a just a leg on the front of his car that kicked and he would like you know flip up and pop around on it. I'm not saying that would never happen. I'm saying that's dumb and I don't want it to happen. Again, I'm not your dad, so the best I can do as a designer is discourage that being the optimal solution, right? Excuse me. So yeah, the other problem I'm having, and actually there's two problems right here on this page. Problem number one, you can see that we go from stuff that's like, okay, transformer, transformation, all right, you can turn into a car, rad, drone nest, I get that. Deity annihilation weapon system. This is a big laser. This is a big holy Marduk laser, which, by the way, instead of calling the machine god Bab el Kominar, we'll call that Marduk with a big A. There we go. I could probably say his. I think pretty clear that he's a he. There we go. So this is like a holy beam laser that everybody can use. Um, and that's fine, but it's also not very like that's not really evocative of the sort of Transformers general robot powers that you would think that the core augmentations would have. And yep, it's not. I was running out of ideas, and the reality is each one of these things has to be distinct as an idea, right? It has to fill a niche that isn't filled by any of the other powers. It can't just replace an earlier one. I mean, in some cases you can, but again, I really endeavored to make those distinct niches. Like, let's say you went from having light armor to heavy armor. I feel like that's kind of it's not just that like you have a better suit of armor on. It's that you are tactically saying something different. Instead of saying I'm going to remain mobile and still have protection, what you're saying is I'm going to be less mobile significantly, but I'm going to be like a crab and it's going to be really hard to crack my shell, right? And so you're doing something different, even though technically it's just an upgrade. You're changing one type of approaching the game for another type, and that's really important to me when it comes to power design. I really dislike when powers simply replace earlier powers, and I really dislike whenever um, powers don't really conceptually give you different options. And these are there's going to be permutations of these that are probably really broken when it comes to doing these with kung fu. I'm not gonna lose too much sleep over it. I think at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they should interact pretty well with the way kung fu works. There's not going to be any huge breaks. The awkwardness of replacing your body with these robot bits is kind of covered by breaking them down into chassis, which is your torso, and then manipulators for arms and mobilizers for legs, because the system already has specific understandings of what it means to have those body parts, and we're just kind of swapping those out for their robot equivalent. So that's not really too awkward. I think that was a really good bit of design. But the other problem I'm having, so problem one is I'm running out of ideas. Problem two on this page is I don't like this abstraction. So this is the you turn into a city, and it's very abstract, which works really well for the demons, right? The demons have the sort of religious way that they become the land around them, right? And since I already have rules for natural terrain, and I have rules for structures on the terrain, and I have rules for natural disasters and what have you, it's not really that hard to kind of just extend that just a little bit, and turn it into this is your character sheet now. We've got some cool design there, but I don't like the way it feels with the robots because they're not. I don't like the way it abstracts. I feel like I don't know. I feel like each individual robot building should be like another part of your body in a much more concrete way. And I don't really know precisely how I want that to manifest because right now, again, I abstract like groups of buildings, like dense city blocks, into just pure description. Like I don't discretely track each building. Uh, so I don't I don't know. The abstractions that work so well for terrain, I dislike when I'm abstracting something's physical form. Again, it's not so bad when it comes to the demons because they aren't. I mean, again, like individual like buildings are built on them and what have you, but they don't really comprise them in such an integral way. They sort of have this. It's almost like their consciousness is like haunting that particular chunk of landscape. Um, it's different in a way that it's hard to describe. So, what I'd like to have is another page after this of here are buildings that you can build that do discrete things, um, and make this. This is probably fine. What I really want are buildings and really big robot parts that you can have when you're a city that give you a distinct tactical reason to become a city. And that's a lot to ask of myself design wise because I have four distinct paradigms which would need their own sets of of giant buildings that you could use that would have to have distinct tactical niches, but I do want that. So right now it's functional, but not as awesome as it could be, and so that's the second problem I'm having here. Running low on distinct ideas and then finding ways to expand how many distinct ideas that I need for an entirely new tier of design that I'm not entirely ready to tackle. So that's fun. Now, you'll note that I actually have two of the four paradigms done, or done enough for government work. I might come back and work with them a little bit. I'm really happy with this one, the authoritarian one, because it has stuff like mind invading mimetic engines and propaganda broadcasters, just really cool stuff. I watched what was it? Oh, darn, I can't remember the name of the anime. Something Wolf Brigade. I don't remember what it's called. It's about guys in this like tactical super cop team that have this ridiculous. Is it Ginro? Ginro? I'll have to look it up. But yeah, their armor is super cool. And it was really inspirational for the kind of armor I put in here. However, again, even with this one, if you thought flare apparatus is awesome. If you scoot down a little bit, you can do stuff like turn into a tank, which is awesome. But then the other one I have is War Zeppelin, um, which okay. So let me break down why I'm kind of iffy on War Zeppelin, because on the first hand, I don't like the idea of them developing something like fighter jets in such a cramped mechanical world. They don't have open skies, so they'd want something with a lot more control. And I think being able to move three dimensionally is still an advantage, but I think that the war zeppelins are more about dropping bombs. So they have bomb emitters. You just float over the enemy and you blow them up with bombs. I'm kind of fine with that. There's something sort of interestingly awkward about that. It feels very like old Soviet, kind of like heavy war machine-ish. The problem I have with that is that that means that the gas bag and propeller system, because it's a two-part system, the gas bag is what lifts you and the propeller is what steers you, right? Are their own unique robot movement systems. So you could just be a dude with a giant gas bag lift system. It's a little goofy looking in my mind. It's not the end of the world, of course. I think it's gonna be a little goofy in this game. I mean, there's some go-go gadget extendo legs and inline rollerblade feet, so it's not like I'm immune to goofiness. It just I okay, so it's fine, right? It's okay, but it feels a little it feels a little bit too goofy even for this. I'm gonna keep it in, but it feels goofy. Where I started struggling was here in Anarchy, because conceptually I wasn't really certain what these guys were about. And so I've got like eventually I have them turning into like um, bullet trains, and I just don't like bullet trains have to be on a track, right? So I have a rail hopper apparatus where you can jump between tracks, and it's like I don't think this works. I don't think trains work. Maybe I might replace that with like submarine or something. Again, though, there are oceans in Bab el Kaminar. I wouldn't call that common, you know? So it's like, what I'm doing is I'm kind of so like when you look at the transformers, right, which is what all the vehicles are. Like the question I asked myself was if I was going to do transformers, like what transformers I want to do. And like there's a lot of really good ones, right? There's tank transformers, car transformers, truck transformers, bike transformers. There's jet transformers, although I don't really want to do jets. Um, and then you have like the ones that are like Dinobots and Insecticons, and it's like, well, okay, we're going a little far here. Um, Although I do have spider legs in these guys. I think it's a really cool one. Um, but yeah, you can see that I'm kind of just stretching here. Um, integrated energy blade. Okay, it's lightsaber. Hidden polymer webbing extruder. So you've got like the web shooters from Spider-Man. Some of these were suggestions from you guys, like the pile bunker. That's just a cool idea. So we got a pile bunker there. You can turn to liquid metal. I like that one. beam lance. It's just another laser, you know. Laser cannon. Again, it's just a laser. Limb replacement protocol is, I'm not really even sure what I'm doing with that one. Gravity inversion engine. I think I just stole that one from the alchemicals. I don't know. But yeah, construction vehicle chassis, spider mech chassis, tank cycle chassis. Actually, the tank cycle's pretty good. I might put that in the other one. But yeah, so I'm kind of running a little light on ideas in these last two. So I'm going to have to go and revisit that. So the problem I have with that is that I've covered a lot of ground conceptually with the design of the first two, and the ones that are designed or that have ideas that I think I can work on, like Skull Crab Emergency Escape Protocol. Now, I haven't written this, but it just means your head pops off, grows crab legs, and scuttles away. That I can work with, right? Integrated magnetic beam device. Okay, this shoots a mag beam that you can like pull stuff closer to you with. I can work with that. Um, Self-mending array. This one's probably going to be a little boring, but I figure it'll just be, you know, a self-healing power. Fair enough. I don't have many of those in the book, so I'll have to be careful with this. But I figure what this will do is it'll like let you eject a limb and replace it once. Like you have like the parts for like different proto limbs in there, something like that. You could even like replace it with something else. So like if your leg blows up and you happen to have like the wheel mobility system, you could just have a wheel instead. So I think that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, but the other one's like the webbing from Spider-Man. I've already got a grav beam, like, or a magnet beam. Do I really need this too? Is it going to be like a net where it just like sprays a net of gooey gunk on you? I don't know. Again, I don't know. I can probably make something cool out of it. Like Spider-Man's cool, so it doesn't feel very like I'm a robot. It feels way too spidery. Um, Limb replacement protocol, yeah, I pretty much already just designed that, so maybe, oh, you know what I could make this do, the self-mending area? I could make it like heal like a single health level and then like pop a level of aura or something. Like that'd be kind of cool. Especially if it only works like once and then it burns out. Or even better if it works temporarily, right? So you like get like your health level back, or even better, it like just takes a let's say that it takes an imbalance down by like, you know, D5 ranks or something, but it's only temporary, and then it'll all come back at the end of the battle. Like that'd be kind of cool. Temporary self-mending array. Actually, I'm going to add the word temporary to that because that might actually be cool. Ah, I'll just completely fail. There we go. Integrated beam lance. Superior polymer webbing cannon. Gravity inversion engine. Pile bunker installation. I did pile bunker. So yeah, you can see how I'm kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel there. However, I came across a brainwave. I thought, well, what if I can use the monsters from the bestiary and give them unique powers, and you could get their powers Mega Man style if you beat them. And I was just like, oh, that's brilliant. Uh, so we're gonna skip over the kung fu section. It's I'm not super happy with the flavors on these, and I want to double the amount I have. I have 3 now. I want to get 6. I've got ideas for all 6 in very broad terms. I need to fix these. These are grayscale. I don't like the gray. This should be a darker. Those colors should be darker. I don't know how to do that though. I can increase the opacity. Oh no, I can't. Never mind. I should have been able to. But yeah, look how cool these guys look. So, okay, I actually have a lot of these. Oh, this is going to be fun too. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to skip over that for now, but we'll come back to that. All right. Oh, where's my bestiary? Where's my bestiary? Uh-oh, that's not good. My bestiary is missing. Well, that kind of sucks. Here, just a second. Oh, damn it. You know what I did? Oh, you know what? I got this. Okay. Where am I going here? Acid and steel. Give me an earlier version of this. Oh gosh. I just deleted a bunch of stuff from my computer. And one of the things I believe I deleted was my uh yeah, my file, which was just all the steel writing. Where are my other versions of this? I know I have more than one. Okay, let's just file, open. Oh, I do. Nope, gone. I'm retarded. I think I'm on version 1.2 here. Let's pull up 1.1. I'm so mad. Because at some point, I formatted this wrong, and I killed my whole bestiary. How did I manage to do this? So here's the old bestiary, which doesn't have everything. Yeah, we're missing a lot there. God damn it. I hate when I lose writing. Okay, well. Oh, no, here it is. Oh, thank God. Okay. Just a second. just give me a second here. Oh, that's fun. What lurks in the clockwork depths of Babel coming on. Okay, so here's our lovely bestiary. Where was I? Oh, right. Okay. So as you can tell, I've got a lot of stuff here, right? Not all of it is like the rad roaches. Obviously, aren't going to be um, robots, but almost everything else is, right? And the question that I have for myself as I work on the bestiary is like, what are the powers of these different things? Like, what are the expressed in augmentations? What can these things do? And I came to the realization as I was working on these that, and my assumption for making the parts of the elements of the bestiary was like, how can I make cool sci-fi horror stories out of these things? Like, each one of these should be able to basically star in its own movie, you know? Um, and yeah, I think we did pretty well with that. But the realization I came to was if I took their eerie, alien, and monstrous powers and translated them into augmentations that you could have, they would make you eerie, alien, and monstrous as a necessity. And so instead of solving the problem of of not giving me enough ideas, they actually gave me sort of too many ideas that effectively made another fifth augmentation paradigm specifically for these monsters um, that really draws you away uh, from the theoretical framework of the other paradigms, because those paradigms within the context of the game were designed to serve the philosophical functions of the societies that engineered them. So, for example, uh, the uh, the authoritarian one was done by the People's Fists, which is the like communist, like Soviet bloc nightmare one, which is powerfully authoritarian. So these are about ruling through oppression and police states and thought control. This is a very 1984 uh, George Orwelly kind of Orwellian is the term I should be using here. Uh, Style of augmentations. So the philosophy is like the Ingsoc philosophy, this centralized, cruel, tyrannical power, right? And everything, all of their powers kind of flow out of that idea. The anarchy guys, however, are meant to be like a cyberpunk thing. Like this really is kind of my nod to cyberpunk by the wonderful Mike Pondsmith and co. And their philosophy is a sort of radical abandonment of that centralization. They're very dispersed and it's very individualistic. And so keeping that kind of anarchic society together requires some instead of being 1984, this is a little more Brave New World. So there's a lot of like crowd control stuff, because there's going to be constant riots and things like that. There's also a lot of things that make drugs. And there's stuff that is just kind of radical, like the burning fist dynamo, which gives you like fire fists, like Kin from Street Fighter. And so there's a sort of artistic element to this as well. Oh, you can actually, maybe I did let you be a jet because there's the jet propulsion engine. Maybe, oh God, maybe you can. Oops, that's fine. So, you're gonna have fighter jets fighting World War I blimps. That's not gonna go well for the blimps. Um, Maybe I'll give them heavier gun installations to make up for it. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of their thing. Um, and I don't know that I have enough ideas to put that all together just in this one uh, to completely fill up this augmentation paradigm. But that's what it's there for. And the aristocratic ones are a little closer to the Gulch Gulch, Atlas Shrugged kind of the brilliant should rule, and they should basically have like a slave caste under them, which is yeah, so these kind of have a Randian vibe to them, and so there's something kind of aristocratic about them, right? Uh, because ultimately, Ayn Rand kind of loves the aristocracy. She loves the idea of like these like the big people being in charge of the little people, and this is the only paradigm that's openly ruled by robots. So all of their stuff is made for like robot on robot combat, and some of it's like really high tech. Um, yeah, and there's a sort of chivalric energy to the whole thing, and so conceptually these need to be filled up with stuff that reflects their philosophy, and so and so I really I so love the idea that you should be able to get augmentations uh, from your defeated sort of alien enemies, that I'm going to keep that in. However, it doesn't actually solve my problem of not having enough ideas uh, with the actual paradigms as they stand. So, so yeah, that's what's going on there. Finally, let's see. Oh, let's go back to this one. Again, I'm going to skip over the kung fu because I don't really have much to say about it right now. I've got a few styles done. They don't really tickle me. They don't have enough style for me to be really excited about them. So I'm going to go in and rewrite them a little bit. But I did want to go. I did want to go here. This I'm really proud of. Okay, so this is the final bit that I'm going to save this. I'm really happy with, and you can see that we've got really good progress, a really good start to this section. Okay, so the lore section of Bab el Kamanar is going to be kind of interesting because each individual, excuse me, each individual civilization, and there are three, gets its own lore, right? And that lore really needs to be um, let's see, it needs to be like if you're trapped in that city, and you kind of are, it's like a pressure cooker of social issues. So like the authoritarian one has to have like a ruling class and an oppressed class and a police class that's doing the oppressing, right? There should be like a secret police element, and there should be revolutionary cells as well. So that all, and like a criminal underworld. So all that needs to be represented, right? And there's a sort of dimensionality to that where like they need to be in places doing things very concretely. In a hex crawl where you can kind of sprawl out on a map, you can sort of have individual pockets of drama, but this is very different. This is like a layer cake, right? It's more like a dungeon. And so I want to design the lores with the idea that you're kind of making a mega dungeon out of these cities. And when you go between the cities, there's another element too, and this is where I drew in another designer who helped me out with it because I was having trouble abstracting this. But that mega dungeon element needs to be present between the cities as well. And again, there's a sort of dimensionality to this where as you're journeying in this strange clockwork world, like and if you ever read the manga Blame, you really got an idea of just how bizarre and enormous and not like very inhuman this whole thing can be. Um, It's not made for human habitation. And so I was trying to think of a way to abstract these journeys, um, such as that you didn't have to make a giant three-dimensional robot maze beforehand, but as the players were journeying through it, you could kind of spontaneously generate it for them. And I also wanted to make certain that the journey itself was engaging in a way that it wasn't just, that takes XYZ amount of time and resources. And you have to roll to see if a bad guy shows up. You should be rolling to see whether you can even make progress, or if you've hit a literal wall of steel that makes it impossible to go the way you've gone, and you have to double back, or if the landscape is shifted in the meantime, or if it's suddenly flooding with oil or growing really hot, or if electric currents are running through it. Like this should be a very living world, and it should be attacking you from all sorts of different angles. So what I did was this right here, where I've taken my my combat system, and specifically the system I use for disasters, and I've changed that to be about journeys. And so the length and the danger of a journey creates its dice pool, and the length also creates its health, and you literally get into like a fight with it, where you're rolling your effort, and it's rolling its dice, and it's throwing difficulties at you, and you're using things like your rations and the different like kits that you've prepared yourself with, and all these things to get around its obstacles and dangers. Meanwhile, it's trying to kill you with all kinds of like robot hazards and strange terrain and traps, and of course enemies will be lurking everywhere. And that's what this system is. This is hex crawling in the clockwork world. It's a very hazardous thing, and it is by far my most robust system for journeys that I made so far. Now this particular journey system is for journeying in Babilka Manar. You could probably adapt it to something else, but a lot of the charts here are going to be specific things that evoke the specifics of this robot world. So this is the initial core system of that, and I'm a little stuck right now because I need to get the details of it. I need to figure out what things it's summoning to challenge you, and that really does require me to kind of sit down and just think of them. I might just read the blame manga and then just start making a list of like, okay, oh, that you could do this, or you could do this. And again, you want to quantify that. Like, you want to know when this thing rolls dice, what can that turn into? What charts does it have to draw from? Uh, I like the idea of there being hazards, strange architecture, traps, um, and enemies at least. And I would like to have things that are a little more nebulous, because I like the idea of you being able to use things like rations as expendable resources against its sets. So whenever it attacks you with something, you could like, use your rations and get rid of certain dangers. But the idea of it attacking you with hunger is a little artificial. So yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be a little bit of conceptual design before I get that like completely where I want it to be. But I'm excited about this. I think this is going to be a really fun system when I get it done, and it'll lead in very naturally to the lures that are in here too. So you go from these wonderful like pressure cookers to this horrifying surreal journey of a clockwork nightmare, and this is going to make this setting very vibrant and very alive. The very last thing I wanted to talk about, I haven't really done a lot of writing on this writing stream. It's mostly just been a talking stream, but it's getting me back in the kind of groove of making this stuff, because you can see where I'm hitting dead ends, right? Where I'm like, okay, well, I've got to design something here. I've got to think of ideas for this, and that's like a place where work can hit a snag, and if you hit enough snarls, all you see are snarls, and you don't see opportunities anymore. So talking about it and talking about what excites you about it, what ideas you do have, kind of it degunks your brain and gets you creative again. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, oh gosh, do I actually have anything for this that I've written down? I don't think so yet. Just a second. Oh, excuse me. Okay, last two things. Last thing number one. Last thing number one. Um, I have figured out how resources work in this world, and it's not super different than the nodes, but nodes can be kind of naturally resource nodes in Lone Wolf can be kind of naturally occurring things, or they can be a little more abstract. Like you could find like a literal gold mine or a field where you could like grow wheat or rice or whatever, or you could find like a big pile of scrap metal and say, oh, well, you know what, this could be a metal node, right? So they can be kind of concrete or a little more abstract. And in any event, like, it's broken down into what resources it gets you. Well, I've broken that down here because, again, it's not a perfectly closed system, but it is kind of a closed system. So I I really like the, what do you call them, the elemental poles in Autochthonia, but I don't know why you'd ever go to them, right? Conceptually, it's interesting to have, say, a pole of electricity and a pole of oil and a pole of steam. That's all conceptually interesting. But in reality, I would never go to any of them. Like, if you go to the pole of oil, you're in oil, so you're completely submerged, right? And you don't really have a method for getting around in that. And you can't see through it, it's opaque. So it's like, okay, conceptually that's interesting that it exists, but in reality it's just not something you can interact with in a meaningful way. You just kind of have to avoid it, right? Same thing with the pole of electricity. It's depicted in the art as a big tube filled with a lightning bolt, and it's not really that different from that when it manifests. You're basically in this gigantic area that you could easily avoid. Like it's legitimately like a cylinder. And if you go in there, you get electrocuted immediately by a bazillion volts of electricity. And there's no reason to go in there. It's not like there's some treasure waiting in the middle of it. So it's just this big. It's a conceptually useless space for a TTRPG, right? I can't make. If I can't put it in a hex and adventure there, there's no point, right? It's sure it's cool that that exists, but who cares, right? It's so inhumanly difficult to interact with that, and there's so little reason to that. Like, why would you be there? Same with the pull of steam. Oh, there's boiling water here. Whoop-de-damn do, right? That's both dangerous and pointless. So conceptually, I like the idea of there being these elemental areas, and I like those artificial elements a lot. So what I did was I started with something like those. There were, I want to say there were six segments, and then in the middle there was Marduk as the godhead, and that was like the initial scheme, and like the first city alpha was just based around the godhead, but very rapidly their society started crumbling, and their sort of top down euthanasia based rationing program was rejected by the people that lived there, and they started forming into groups, and those groups started a war with each other. And whenever you start a war, you hoard resources or you destroy resources to deny them to your enemies, and it completely screwed up their super delicate plan. So Marduk is looking at the plan failing and the resources going all over the place. The population is exploding because, again, you want to have more people than your enemies. So the reality of human nature collided with this perfect central planning, and obviously human nature won out, which means it was a catastrophe. So Marduk's like, okay, well, two things need to happen. Thing number one that needs to happen is I need to get these people away from each other because otherwise everyone's going to die. They're going to do irreparable damage to a critical system, and we're just going to die. So he did something called the Sundering, I think it was. I think it was the Sundering. I I wrote it down. It's a thing. The Maiming. There it is. Okay. So the Maiming was the internal robot world, like splitting apart and moving all the different people into different segments of the larger bodies. I'm going to isolate them so that I at least buy myself some time, right? The second thing he did was he sent out these tendrils into the world, and he started extracting resources from the broader world of Ashes and Ghosts, and he instead of having six distinct large resource pools for each resource, he broke those up into these cathedrals, which are still huge in their stockpiles, but they're more or less armored fortresses that are designed to keep invading humans out of them. So they can't just plunder and destroy resources. Now they've got to deal with them in terms of sacrificing resources or risking resources to take them like a military target. And then he created conduits between these things to move the resources around, so that again, that he wouldn't die, and these people wouldn't starve. So now, um, you basically have levels that are kind of like dungeons that you can go to, right? And they have resources in them which you need, because you need resources to build your augmentations and to feed your people and what have you. So there's a reason people go out into the reaches to get these resources, and it, they're designed to be hostile to invaders. So I basically invented dungeons in the Clockwork world, which I'm really happy with that. But the other thing I kept, and this is an idea I implanted directly from, or I transplanted rather directly from the Alchemicals book, is the conduits. I love the conduits. I love the idea that there's these big tubes that nobody knows what's in them, and you can tap them, and you can just let out whatever is in them. And I thought that was neat. So I kept those up. Now, obviously, you get less from a conduit than you would get from a cathedral, but they're easier to get to. And I thought that pretty much got the relationship between player characters and resources about where I wanted it. Because you want the resources to drive player behavior, right? And I like the idea of player behavior where they go out just a little bit into the reaches, right? They find a conduit and they tap it and it gives them something useful. And they use that as their resource node, as like an advance base, or a border fort, more or less, and they go out from there to explore further. That works really well for me, and I think that's going to drive really interesting play. And I want you to be able to use this one setting to have whole campaigns if you want. That should be possible. You should be able to mix this with the rest of the supplements if you want to. It should be completely up to you, but it needs to be able to self-sustain and it needs to have something to say for itself, which with how you approach it. Now, um, Naraka doesn't really do that, the acid part of the book. You can just get involved in the demon politics, but there's a certain emptiness to it, because hell kind of relies on earth for things like souls and any kind of like anything like tangible, so Naraka is really about expanding your territory out of hell. um, you can go back into hell, but it's a really dangerous place, and although you could conquer within hell, there's a sort of I want to say inertia to it, and almost inevitability, because the Ashura are so much in charge of it that they're literally physically the landscape of hell. So conquest is awkward in hell. So it really is about getting the powers from these beings and bringing it into the mortal plane and causing havoc. Like that's you're kind of expanding out and blossoming out from hell, right? Or bringing stuff from Earth back into hell. So like that's kind of the relationship that Naraka has to the setting. It's very connected, and it's connected in the core book too. Like Suicide Heaven is a direct conduit to Naraka. It's almost totally fallen into it. So it's supposed to be very close. This, however, this world, Abel Kamenar, is sealed off from it. It only occasionally dips down with these giant tendrils to like steal things from the world of ashes and ghosts, and then it goes back to being its own little closed and contained place. And I really like that. I like the idea that there's almost hermetic seal between them. They almost put the seal of Hermes between them. Um, I like that because it means it's just again, it gives you something different than the hell part of the book gives you, but it does mean that I need to think about what the players are going to be doing as robot people, and how they're going to relate to resources within this setting. So I'm really happy with that. So that was the last thing I wanted to tell you, part one. Uh, Gosh, what was part two? I wish I'd written it down now. Oh, okay. I think this was it, and I might be wrong. I may have to come back to this, but I think that the reason I told you all of that was because I think, again, I think that as I go through and I re-examine all the different underpinnings of how the robot bodies work, and all the different like setting stuff I've added in with how you're supposed to explore in this world and how you're supposed to relate to resources. I believe I have the notion that that will inspire me for different things that the augmentations could reasonably do. Like, for example, an idea that got floated in the Fistaverse was that lasers in particular were good at getting through additional ablative armor, and that armor was a really big issue, tactically speaking, in Babel Kiminar because a lot of the bad guys were robots. You know, a lot of your enemies would be robots. And so that strategically, the reason that you would have lasers was specifically to be a can opener. It wouldn't really be that great against living targets, but it would help to even the odds against the super heavy armor from the armored targets. Um, and so stuff like that is really inspirational when it comes to designing augmentations. They can have distinct tactical uses and they can have a cool physical manifestation. So, all of that stuff that I've talked about, all those different little systems and ideas that I've had, will probably feed back into these augmentations and help me fill them up and clean them out and get them finished. Once the augmentations are finished, once these augmentations are finished, I still have the Kung Fu, which I need to double in size. Again, I've got ideas for that. And I'm pretty good at writing Kung Fu, so I'm not too worried about that. I need to finish this system. Now, my co author who gave me the stuff for this, Taylor Lane is their name, um, they have a bunch of charts and what have you. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into those and use that here. I do the bestiary and the powers from the bestiary, and then you do the lores for the individual civilizations. So there's still a bit of writing to do, as you can tell. But at the end of the day, that's going to give us an extremely robust product, which lets you be all kinds of robot. Uh, so yeah, I think. How long has this stream been going on? Let's look real quick. Oh, about an hour. Okay, an hour is a pretty good amount of time. Now, I didn't get a ton of writing done today, unfortunately, but I did get a lot of talking done. And I psyched myself up for the next writing stream. So we'll try to do a little bit more writing, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. Um, Maybe next Sunday. I haven't decided yet. I'm getting a little sleepy. I got work tomorrow. But I wanted to give you guys an idea of where we were in the writing, what I want to do, some of the snarls I've hit, and some of the ways I've been making progress. I'm really proud of all of this. I think we've laid groundwork that's going to pay fat dividends in the not terribly distant future. So that was my writing stream, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm going to wrap it up and export this to YouTube, and hopefully I didn't like mute myself or something stupid. And then we'll do another stream in the not terribly distant future. We'll see if I can't maybe do 4 a month. Do them on Sundays, do them on Saturdays. You know. So yeah. Um, Thanks again. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.